We samurai are outnumbered. Each of our warriors must be the match of 10 of our enemies. Each Orochi is a match for 100. Swift, strong, the truest masters of the katana. They move like shadows, with lore taken from the ninja clans. Their armor, a perfect balance of flexibility and strength. Orochi, they are the finest warriors the world has ever known.
Suffice to say, when people think samurai, the Orochi is often what they think of. He's our katana-wielding assassin of the samurai faction with the basic and classic armor of a samurai. His name is Orochi, and it means serpent. This is likely a reference to the mythical creature Yamato no Orochi, an eight-headed serpent in Japanese mythology. Now, the reason for that is likely to highlight their lethal and stealthy manner of dealing death to their enemy. The trailer and lore on Orochi is unfortunately vague, so it's hard to give a lot of information on him. The most we're given is that they're an assassin and that they're equal to about 100 of their enemies because the samurai are so, outnumbered. They wield the katana and use lore taken from the ninja clans, at least until the shinobi comes along. Oops. And sadly, there's not a lot I can say when discussing the history of the Orochi because, well, they didn't necessarily exist. Samurai weren't broken up into groups like this. You didn't have your Kensei class or Orochi class. But what I can tell you are a few things about the weapon and a couple things that the trailer got a little wrong. For one thing, we see the Orochi throwing a kunai in the trailer. Kunai were not good throwing knives, despite what anime may tell you. And also, I'd like to point out that while the katana seems to be the Orochi's main weapon, the katana was actually more of a backup weapon. So I see the Orochi as more of a duelist than I do a actual warrior. Yeah, I see him as a duelist.
It's time to do.
No, none of that. Shame on you. Moving on. I would also say that the trailer says we samurai are outnumbered. I find this very funny because at the time period when the samurai were most prominent, which would be the Sengoku and Edo periods of Japan, Japan was incredibly largely populated and there were lots and lots of samurai. I believe that the Japanese populace probably outnumbered most European cities. At least, I believe so. I may need to recheck my facts. But I just think that's really interesting that the samurai are so outnumbered in the For Honor lore, but in actual history, we're very, very populated. When I think Orochi, like I said, I think a duelist.
It's time to do.
Stop. No. I think of someone who has something to prove to not only the rest of the world and to their enemies, but also to themselves. They want to prove that they're the best around. Nothing's going to ever get them down. The Orochi are the ones who don't just fight to overcome an enemy, they fight to overcome themselves and personal weakness. They want to prove that they are the best fighters in the world. That they can use just one sword. I mean, if you look at all the other assassins in For Honor, these are the only assassins who use a single weapon. The rest all use dual weapons, but he doesn't need two weapons. He's got the only one he needs, and he's going to master it to the point that no one can stand against him. How's he going to do it? Well, the first step is to come properly armed and armored. So, what does the Orochi come into the battle with? So, I'm going to go over the bare bones basics with this armor, but I'm going to do a completely separate video. I'm doing something totally new. I want to start a different series of For Honor analysis videos where I go specifically into the weapons of the warriors. I want to go actually very specifically into their weapons because there's a lot to talk about with the weapons. The first time I started recording this, I went way too long on the katana because there's a lot I want to say about it. So we'll save that for another video. But for now, let's go over the bare bones basics. As for the armor that the Orochi is wearing here, Wooden. Okay, so I want to bring this up because a couple people got on me about this in different means of communication. They said, well, Cliff, wooden armor did exist in Japan. Yes, it did. Before the samurai. Wooden armor would be dated back to the Yayoi period, which was well before the samurai, and it was worn by Japanese soldiers as well as iron armor, you know, or bronze armor. This was not the age of the samurai. What happened was it started as iron and wooden armor, progressed into rawhide and lamellar armor. Then when the arquebus showed up, like firearms showed up, they had to evolve the armor again to deal with firearms, and thus they started making steel and lacquer steel armor, plated armor. And so by the time the samurai came along, you had rawhide and leather armor. You had stronger armor that was more light and absorbent, and then later came the steel armor. So wooden armor would not be around during the age of the samurai. Now, if you have evidence or proof that during the age of the samurai there was wooden armor, I'd love to see it. I'm totally ready to be proven wrong. I totally want someone to bring that up because I want to learn. I want to learn more. This isn't me calling anyone out. This is me saying, please show me if it existed. But based on the information I've gathered, there was no wooden armor in the age of the samurai. But leaving that aside, it's very similar to the Kensei's armor. You got your Do, Curious, Sode, shoulder guards, Kabuto helmet, Mingu, cloth mask this time, some Tsunaate, shin guards, very nice. Not a lot else to say. I guess I could say those are Kote arm guards there. But anyway, that's basically how the armor looks, and briefly going over the weapon, very briefly, y'all recognize the samurai sword by now, I hope. 4 foot long, close to 4 foot long blade, slightly curved, sharp on one edge, fast, lethal, good for cutting, a very specialized weapon, very unique. The problem that I have with the katana is the kind of people who talk about it. You got two extremes. You got the extreme who think that the katana is the greatest weapon ever made by man. It is the most wonderful sword in all of history, and to them I say, no, it is not. Of all the swords in history, I don't even think katana makes it to top 5. I think it may be in top 10, but it is by no means the greatest sword ever invented. It has its share of problems, which we'll go over in the other video. But then you've got your other side who say, oh, the katana is the worst sword ever. I actually had one person say, I'd rather take a tablespoon into combat. And to them I say, you're an idiot. The katana is by no means a terrible sword. It has a lot of great things about it. There are wonderful things to say about the katana, and I will say them in the later video. But think about this, for those of you who think it's a terrible sword. If it's such a terrible, awful sword, why didn't the samurai evolve? Why didn't they create a totally different sword to use? Swords evolve with the times and with the culture. The stronger the armor becomes, the different the sword has to become. The stronger the protection or the difference in the culture, the more different the sword has to be. Why would you keep a sword that is effectively worthless? So worthless that it would be more efficient to bring in a tablespoon. Think about that for a second. The katana is a fabulous sword, a wonderful sword. I can't wait to talk about it, but we'll save that for another video. Before we do that, though, let's show my Orochi. This is my Orochi, and hey, you want to know why I use this armor setup? Because looks like she's wearing steel armor here.
Thank you!
Yes, thank you. Thank you for wearing steel armor. I really appreciate it. It looks a lot better. I like the plating, the plate look, like you've got some layered plates for the Sode. The Kabuto looks like it's made of steel, which is very cool. You've got a protective Sode hanging from the back there, which is kind of neat. I actually really like that. It looks like you have two Tanto daggers hanging from the front and back here. Interesting. They're not used in combat, so, but kind of cool. And the katana, this is the Jorogumo katana set, which I really love the color scheme. I love the look. It looks very nicely designed. It's probably one of my favorites. This is my Orochi, and I love the design. So now that we've talked about how she looks and the weapon they're bringing in, how do you fight with Orochi? Orochi, like all assassins, has a temporary guard, meaning that they have to shift between the directions of their guard constantly to maintain a defense. Also, like all assassins, their lights are insanely fast. Orochi can unleash up to 3 lights consecutively. The lights come out so fast that it's caused a lot of people to hate Orochi because so many just like to spam that light. Also, since we're talking about lights, I can do a light from above and do it consecutively to get 2 free lights. Now, the 3-hit combo can continue as long as I mix in a heavy with that 3 light. So if I go heavy, light, light, that's fine. But if I ever do two heavies together, the combo ends. So heavy, heavy, I can't do any more. Plus, as my brother just proved, the heavies are a little slow and kind of easy to see coming, so they can be deflected, especially when they come from the top like that. So, just to recap, Orochi is capable of doing a 3-hit combo as long as she doesn't do any 2 heavies side by side. If she does 2 consecutive heavies, the combo ends. Now, if that was all to the Orochi's moveset, we wouldn't be talking about much, but there's a lot more to it, because like all assassins, Orochi has some tricks up their sleeve. The first one that I want to talk about is the zone attack. The zone attack of the Orochi drains a lot of stamina, but it does insane damage and comes out so ungodly fast, most people don't see it coming. So it's important to use that if you want to bait someone or get in some quick damage because they're just overwhelming you. Also, let's talk about the side dodge ability. Yes, like all assassins, Orochi has the ability to do a side light attack. You'll notice the blue aura means that this attack is undodgeable. So even if my brother were to try to dodge backwards or dodge to the side, I could still hit him. This attack comes out really fast, but also it takes a minute for the spin to finish. So sometimes your opponent will see it coming, and they'll be able to block you. Plus, because it's a light attack, if it's parried like that, it opens your enemy up for a free heavy. So it's good to use those only sparingly. But let's say you don't want to dodge to the side. Are there other ways to counterattack? Absolutely. Orochi can do a back step and then a forward strike with a light attack. This attack is great if your opponent tries to strike you and you want to be able to catch them off guard. Once they try to attack, you dodge in and strike. Another way is what's known as the Storm Rush. By stepping back and holding down the heavy attack button, and it does cost stamina the longer you're in this position, you can do a rushing attack at your opponent and do it from either direction depending on which way your analog stick is pointed. Now if you do it from either side, then it does moderate damage, but if you do it from the top, it becomes undodgeable. I'll do a few here. And of course the one from the top. As you can see, these are absolutely stunning ways to get in some awesome damage and some quick attacks. Plus, the last one that I'll go over here is the forward dodge light attack. This is also undodgeable, and it's pretty cool. But again, like the side attacks, it's pretty easy to see coming. Now, a few other things to talk about when it comes to Orochi, because again, there's just so much to talk about with Orochi. Orochi's light attack abilities that we just went over and those dodging capabilities is what makes so many people hate Orochi. They all say, oh, well, you need to slow down her attacks. You need to make it so that her attacks don't do as much damage. And this is one of the reasons why For Honor's community has become a little toxic lately. I think Orochi is fine the way they are. I think that Orochi doesn't have that many problems. It's really how best you use them. But there's one last thing to go over with Orochi besides the dodging abilities. For example, not all heroes can do this, but when Orochi gets in a guard break, Orochi has the ability to get a free overhead heavy attack. Lots of people love this maneuver, so if you ever get guard broken by an Orochi, just know that you're getting in a sudden attack. It's just the way she works. Now, like all assassins, Orochi does have the deflect, but Orochi was the first warrior to have 2 different kinds of deflects. Depending on whether you hit the light attack or heavy attack, you have 2 different forms of attacking. We'll show the light attack first. This attack, if you hit the light attack button when you do the deflect, it grants a guaranteed hit. Not a lot of damage is done, but there's no way they can get out of the way of it, and you're back in the setup for your next attack. But let's say that you do press the heavy button instead. This one is a charged up attack, and it does a lot more damage, but with the cost of my brother could dodge out of the way if he wanted to. Although most of the time they don't dodge in time, so it's a pretty good attack to use if you can manage to land it. But these 2 deflects make the Orochi incredibly skilled and incredibly good in a duel situation. Let's show it one more time. See, my brother could easily dodge out of the way if he wanted to. So, What else can I say about the Orochi? What are some last things I can say in terms of fighting as the Orochi? I would say be creative. Orochi isn't a direct character like Kensei or Warden, but she's not quite as complex as some others we'll get to later. The key is creativity. Use your vast arsenal to overwhelm and outthink your prey, or, you know, you could just press the light attack button repeatedly until you win if you want to be that kind of player. But here's the real question. How do you fight an Orochi and win? Because, again, like I said, a lot of people hate Orochi. What are some steps? I can think of 3 ways to fight an Orochi and do pretty well. The first is don't get greedy with your attacks. As we demonstrated, Orochi is great at counterattacking, so you want to make sure that you let the Orochi make some of the first moves so that you can prepare for them. Second, when they spam their light attacks, don't get scared. Light spamming usually only works and is effective because you overwhelm your opponent. If you can stay calm and manage to see which direction they like to start their light attacks, you can usually manage to predict it. And then finally, light spam too. If you're playing an assassin character or you're playing a heavy character who does light spams, you can overwhelm them as well. Because they're an assassin, they can't always get their guard up in time. And so and that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you play Orochi. So, now that we've talked about how they look, what they're armed with, and how they fight, let's go ahead and get into those executions.